I was 21, recently became a police officer, and I was also recently dumped, so my friend suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and a new cop, I had the I'm invincible and I can take on anyone mentality. I matched with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female. We chatted and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look at the stars and hang out. We could meet up at her house. So the night came, I was excited, and she seemed to be excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed really dim headlights in the distance. Then the van started driving towards us, and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car, and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight I had in the car and walked up. In the front driver's side of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what was going on, and if he can back his car up a little bit. He was very polite, said he was the owner of the property, and said he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he's having trouble with poachers on his property, and just wanted to make sure we weren't going to be shooting at anything. I assured him we only came out to look at some stars and wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that, told me to have a nice date, and drove away. After that, the girl was texting non-stop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car and I moved to a more defensive position. The same man came close enough to almost hitting my car. She hopped out of the car at that point and ran towards the guy. I immediately knew I was fucked. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied. Obviously, he then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me they had a gun, and to give them my money and my truck, and I won't get hurt. Of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry and said they didn't want to hurt me. He then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told him that I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm, and to lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all of us, they complied. I was able to call 911, tell them my name and badge number. I had two at gunpoint and needed backup immediately. I gave our dispatcher the best directions I could to this field, while on the phone. They both fled. Again, stupid new cop young guy mentality, I chased them. I took off after the man, who ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for about maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops, and saw a muzzle flash. My I'm invincible mentality went right out of the window. I ran like hell back towards my car and peeled the hell out of there. I went back to the area I picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. Of course, they were both completely understanding and didn't give me any shit about it at all. The most used words were dumbass and stupid fucking rookie. I hopped in their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they started getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right on the center console and searched the car. What scared me the most was when my field training officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out, and told me to come and look in the back of the van. Both of them were pale and looked horrified. I went to the back of the van, where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, and a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked to be like dried blood. In the front seat passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We called for immediate backup and detectives. When they investigated the blood, it turned out it wasn't blood. The plates had been stolen and the van was reported stolen. I still get shit about the whole encounter, but luckily no one got hurt. I will never use online dating again. Ever. As a bit of a backstory, I was working at a small chain motel in the Midwest as a night auditor, so my hours were normally 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. With those kinds of hours and being a woman, I'm bound to have some weird stories. The scariest time I've ever had working there happened within my first month. So it was a little before my shift started, and because I was single and 22, I was on Tinder before work. I matched with this guy who seemed cool. A little goth alternative and into Ouija boards and tarot, which is my type. So I was hype at the time. We talk for a bit and I tell him I have to go to work. We say goodbye. Now that night was my first night off training, so I was running the motel by myself for 9 hours. I was already a little nervous, but then this vaguely familiar guy comes up to the front desk and asks for me by name. In my head, I've got red flags blaring at me because this dude is weird. Not by looks, but just by vibe. I tell him that I'm me, and then he explains that he was the guy from Tinder. He saw that I was less than a mile away, so we went to see if it was possibly working at his hotel. That's right, this guy was staying where I worked. Red flag number 2. I stay behind the comfort of my desk for 2 hours because this guy won't stop talking to me. Mostly about his ex that left him, and how he beat people up, and how he wanted to bang me. Needless to say, I was uncomfortable, and this hadn't happened to me before in a work environment, so I did not know what to do. He finally decided to go to bed, about 2 or 3 a.m., and I took a much-needed smoke break. I go outside, and right after I spark up, guess who shows up? Creepy dude. I snooped a bit on his account, and he was a painter and was doing work locally, so he wasn't from here. He tells me about where he's from and keeps getting closer and closer to me. He asks if he can smoke weed, which I said yes so he'd get away from me. I showed him where the cameras weren't, and he pulled me in, smelled my neck and started grabbing my ass. I swiftly hit him and told him he better not fucking touch me. I threw my cigarette on the ground and grabbed my phone to call my boss before going inside. Creepy dude rips the phone from my hand and proceeds to text himself. Now he had my number. First thing he sends me is a grotesque picture of his extremely body-modded penis. Now I've seen some penises in my day, but that was nothing like I'd ever seen. Then came the creepy BDSM porn gifs with captions like, "I can't wait to do this to you. You know what room I'm in." Now I'm already freaking out and I don't know why I didn't call the cops and my boss wasn't answering. So there's me in the back office having the panic attack of my life when I get one more video. Why I clicked on it, I'll never know. I refuse to say what I saw in detail, but it was a snuff porn film. Very violent, very sexual. I then locked myself in the back room, cried, and waited for a few hours before proceeding to make hotel breakfast. The text went on for a few days until I had enough. I got the balls to tell my boss. He immediately kicked out the creepy dude and banned him from our hotel. His company is not even allowed to book with that hotel anymore. In hindsight, I shouldn't have called the police, but I was too scared. Creepy dude, let's never meet again. So about 4 years ago, I was doing a year abroad in Switzerland as part of my degree. Just before leaving, my boyfriend and I ended our relationship and he was off to America and myself Switzerland. Anyway, I was quite bummed at first and then decided it'd be fun to download Tinder and just piss about and date meaninglessly, as I wasn't going to be there for longer than an academic year. So I went on quite a few dates. Some were god-awful and some were pretty decent people. I was in Geneva, so there were people from everywhere basically. A few months in, I matched with a French guy, and we were chatting for a while. My French and his English were more or less the same level, so there were a few mild miscommunications, but nothing big. I was 20, and at the time I had my age preference set to something like 20 or 27, so I've been chatting with this French guy. I'll call him Pierre, obviously, for a couple of weeks, and he seems quite cool. He's 27, so a fair bit older, and he's a science secondary school teacher at an all-girls school. Remember, this makes it even weirder. So we went for a drink, and he buys us quite a few rounds, which is great because it's Switzerland and I'm a poor student. By the end of the night, I'm pretty drunk, and I remember making it out with him, then getting dropped back to my student accommodation by Pierre. Anyway, I see him a couple other times after this, and he's always pushing the alcohol when we're together. One evening, I slept over and it was too late for me to get back, and I wake up in the morning, and he'd taken off my bra whilst I was asleep. He's wide awake, rubbing my back and staring at me. I hadn't slept with him either, I'd just been making out so far. Then he told me his mom was coming to visit, and did I want to meet her. I met this guy like 3 times. I decided that I was done with this weirdo, so when I left, I was planning on what to say to get rid of him. Anyway, back home later, I got a text that said something in broken English like, "We slept beautifully," and I just left it on read. Later that evening, I got a call from him, but I just let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, he sounded really upset and said that he wanted to confess something to me because he was falling in love with me and needed to be honest. He revealed that he lied about his age. This reminded me of that episode in Friends where Monica accidentally sleeps with a high school student thinking he was in his 20s. This guy looked quite young, so I thought he lied and was younger than 27. But he was actually 35. I know that's not particularly old, but to date a 20-year-old knowing she thinks you're young, I find weird. I blocked him on Facebook and on my phone and just sort of got on with the last week of term. He turned up at the reception desk one day, having known where I live because he dropped me home that once. The receptionist asked him to leave and informed me as he got quite insistent, so they warned me. I didn't hear from him again after this, which was good, and I was flying back to the UK in a week for the Christmas holidays. During the holidays, I got a random Facebook friend request from a pretty legitimate looking profile, so I accepted it just in case I knew them. Bad idea. I get a huge, great essay from Pierre saying, "I tracked your flight all the way back home to check you got home okay." Okay, creep. I blocked this other profile and get a message request from another profile about a week later saying he checked the flights from Bristol to Geneva online and decided that I would have chosen the cheaper one closer to term, so he will meet me and we can chat. Now, I don't know if he just turned up at the airport every time a flight from Bristol came in. There were about 2 or 3 a day. But yeah, when I land, and I didn't think he'd be there because who would be able to guess the exact flight I was on? The minute I come through the gates, I can see him holding a sign with my name on it and some flowers. Luckily, he was distracted at the time, so I managed to slip by and get on the train into the city. My friend was already back, so I told her to meet me, and then we went to the police because this guy was fucking weird. Didn't have any trouble with him after this, and he probably found someone else to obsess over. But again, he is a teacher. So I downloaded Tinder when I was 18, and being single in a big city, I ended up going on a lot of fun dates. One guy really caught my attention because, well, he was really, really attractive. We chatted a bit and I felt pretty into him, so I decided we could meet for coffee. He was sweet, charming, and we had a great conversation about school, art, and music. We found out we were both musicians, and the date was going so well that I agreed to walk the few blocks back to his house so he could play some music for me. I was new into online dating and was still fairly naive, so I followed him into his weird converted garage bedroom and sat down on the couch while he pulled out his keyboard. He played for a while, and I started getting a little antsy. He was super into the music and getting aggressive with the keyboard. He was slamming keys down and making these weird noises, so I shot up out of my seat and told him that I should get going soon. He totally went back to normal, his tone changed and his posture became less hunchbacked. So when he apologized for getting carried away, I agreed to sit back down on the couch so we could talk more. He came and sat down next to me, and we went back into our earlier conversation. He seemed back to normal and nice, so when he asked if he can kiss me, I agreed. He leaned in towards me, and I closed my eyes waiting. And I waited, but didn't feel his lips. So I opened my eyes, a peek, and I saw him staring at me. I threw my head back surprised, but he had snaked his hand back toward my hair and interwoven his fingers so I couldn't move. He then inhaled deeply and told me, "You smell like you're Jewish. I can tell because you smell like my aunt's house." I was totally freaked out at this point, partly because yes, I am Jewish, and tried to wiggle away from his frantically stating that I had to go. He then jumped up on top of me, and to my horror started sobbing, yelling that he's so sorry he made me feel uncomfortable. His body weight was completely preventing me from moving, so I forced myself to rub his back. I told him that I wasn't uncomfortable at all, and that he was really sweet. He made me promise over and over again that I see him again before finally getting up off of me. I moved to the door and tried to calmly tell him that I really needed to go. He was blocking my way, and all I could think of was that I needed him to let me leave. I couldn't fight him off. He told me I needed to kiss him before I could leave, and I quickly pecked him on the lips. He smiled at me, and I was glad that he didn't expect more. "Call me, please. I think that went well," he said, as he opened up the garage door and I scurried out. I called my mom and started crying as soon as I went far enough away. She called me a cab home and I blocked him from every way we had contacted each other. I saw him once after that on campus, and that was enough for me, so I hope we never meet again.